And we should be live. Yes. Bless you.
Thank
I
you.
love the fact that I can, you can't mute the tab before you actually have anything coming through it. So I got to test to see whether or not, sound was coming through the stream. I can at least hear myself. So no, that worked.
Yep, I'm getting sound through Twitch. Have to turn
So,
it all the way down, otherwise the
all
offset.
right. We are starting to gather a crowd. Hey, One Red. Hey, Rachel. Harley. Joffrey. Good to see everyone. Yeah, you know something? What the hell? Let's go straight to the there we go. All right, welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Loremaster's Arcanum. This is episode 102. Jeez. We did have the big 100 a couple weeks ago, and we are just keep moving on right into the new year. As you can see, for once, I'm starting to get to the point where I have it set up so that we're a little consistent from week to week. If I'm streaming or John's streaming it, still some things that need to be ironed out. I apologize to all who take advantage of the chat also appearing on the stream itself. Unfortunately, I do not have the URLs to point to for that. I will try to get that from John for the next time I need to do this. It's just generally a good thing to have. As well as there's some small other things that I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, the actual frames for our display captures and such. But we're here. You're here. Mike's here with me. Welcome, Mike. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
And tonight we are going to be talking about a topic that I honestly don't know that it gets discussed all that much. And I want to find out whether or not there's a reason. And we're going to do some polling. So, Amanda, I might be keeping you a bit busy tonight. There's some polls here um, that I'm curious as to what the response is going to be, because it's going to kind of tell whether or not this is a topic that should be discussed more often. And that topic is the cost of wizardry, or more to the point, being the cost of being a wizard. So, Amanda, I'm going to give you the first poll that I'd like you to put up. And this is going to be a simple yes or no poll. Have you ever played a wizard in D&D? Tracy, thank you very much for the subscription, 7 months, and Steve Bloodwald at 31 months. Wizard, perpetual brokenness. Yeah, Mr. Slothman, there's something to be said for that. Let's see. While we get that going, so when I talk about the cost of being a wizard, we're going to start with the chat. I'm curious to what you all associate the cost of wizardry as being, and then Mike, once we've got a few in there, I'll have you go and you give me your thoughts on this. So for those of you who either have DM'd for wizards or have played wizards in D&D, or it could be CNC or some other like game, whether it be Pathfinder and such. And I can see right now we've got a few 9 people already in the grouping that have played wizards. Wizards pay with their lives if not played smart. Pat, that is absolutely 100% correct.
I
uh,
played when you die to a bag of cats.
oh man. Uh,
Love wizard. You throw a cat in a bag, pick it up, to piss the cat off, pull it over their head, dead wizard.
First level wizard, stumbles and falls and dies. Arcane exhaustion, Steve. Arcane exhaustion is a physical toll for channeling the forces. I mean, I like these answers, but Josh, Iculus, you getting closer to the kind of costs that I was referring to. Not to say that the other costs are to be ignored, because Pat, you're absolutely right. If Wizard doesn't play things smart, they can one, get themselves killed, and when you get to higher levels, they can end up killing themselves accidentally through their own magic. But yeah, casting components.
The second edition wizard with fireball,
Mm, yeah.
because too many times they forget it's 10 cubic feet per level. 10th level, that's 100 cubic feet if you don't adjust the size.
That's basically filling a hall there. Uh,
You get high
that's
enough, you can throw the fireball as far down the dungeon as you can see and clear half of it.
Of course, Pat brought up the famous, now it's a famous meme. I didn't ask how big the room was. I said cast fireball. And yeah, actually, that was the other thing. The second edition also brought in the wild mages, Boomer Doom. So, Mike, let me ask you, what do you? Josh mentioned expensive casting components, and it's funny. It doesn't even necessarily have to be expensive. Though there are some spells that have very expensive components, like a diamond or some other gem or something rare that requires it. But what are some of the costs that you think of when associate with wizards?
That's actually one of the biggest is just the specialty components you need because,
Mm-hmm.
the identify spell used to take 100 gold piece pearl anytime you wanted, and you had to cast identify to identify a magic item.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, CNC, they still, I think it still costs a pearl. It costs something expensive. I know that much. Um, so here's a cost for you. Uh, how many of you as players, or as a DM, have had wizards pay for their spells, for learning and copying new spells? I was kind of curious. I looked into. I had to go back and look at the fifth edition wizard, because I wanted to find out where what costs there may be associated with them, because the common complaint is things get a little basically a little simplified, and there's, to an extent, that is certainly true. Um, but one thing that I noted and I found interesting is for copying spells into a spell book. Uh, where is it? I'll find the passage right here. Um, Copying spell to a spell book. For each level of the spell, the process takes 2 hours and 50 gold pieces. That's just for copying the spell. Just for copying a spell into your spell book. That's not a small expense, especially when you're talking about low level characters. Um, you get to ninth level, and suddenly that's a 400. Get to a ninth level spell, and I mean, if you get to a ninth level spell, you're hopefully going to be rolling in gold at that point as a hero, as an adventurer. But you're quite. It's going to be quite expensive learning new spells. Uh, I'm curious as to, Mike, have you had your wizards pay for new spells?
Um, Normally, wizards get two free spells a level. They don't pay for them. They're either
Mm-hmm.
already in the spell book, their master gave them to it, or as they level up, they figure stuff out on their own and scribe them in on their own. If they're copying something from a scroll, then yes, that can get expensive. But like was it Absalon Dax said, he quit a game because he had to pay for spells, but the DM never gave him enough cash to copy him.
That's
You
I'm that bothers me that bothers me to start with. When the other players aren't going to lend you the gold either, basically to save their tails, that's even more concerning. Uh, that does not sound like a fun group to have been playing it.
I
I'm.
played I played in a game with the DM who said stats didn't matter,
Mhm.
and we had a guy that's notoriously a horrible dice roller, and his highest stat was an 11. His lowest stat was a 9. DM wouldn't let him re-roll. And if you look at the rules, if you look at the stats, if you don't have a net +3 overall, you're supposed to re-roll your stats in the player's handbook. Didn't let him. He's trying to play an elven archer. So he took a -1 to his hit points for con to get a 13 deck so he could have a chance of hitting something. Rolled for gold and rolled a 1. So he can't even afford a bow. And the DM never gave us money, never let us find a bow. It was a very painful game to play, and it didn't last but a couple sessions.
I that's oof. I I don't understand what the point of being like that is. It just doesn't make any sense. Uh, that's like killing your own game. You're just, what are you doing? It's interesting. I went back and looked because Pat mentioned the inks and such. The part of the gold cost is they also include mastering the spell as you're copying it and learning it. So yeah, no, I mean, I can see that as far as it costs. Here's another thought for y'all. How many spell books does your wizard have?
Whenever I played one, I had my goal was 2 full sets of spell books and then a traveling spell book. Because if you actually pay attention to, at least in second edition, they actually
Mm-hmm.
recommended you have a second copy of your spell books that you leave with a mentor or some stored in some very safe place. You had your a normal set of spell books you kept at home or whatever, and then you had a traveling spell book that had a subset of your spells because you know you'd use a book a level pretty much because it was a number of pages equal to the level of the spell was how many pages the spell took up.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm talking, Joffrey. I'm talking how many spell books overall, because Mike mentioned the traveling spell book, and I mean, I'm not saying spell books full of spells. Well, they might be full of spells, or hopefully at one point they're going to be full of spells. But here's the thing: if you've got one spell book and it's a spell book that you're carrying around with you, what happens if you lose that spell book? Wizard's going to have a problem. Traveling holds 64 levels of spells. Steve, for which edition was that in, or is that? Are you quoting from? Not sure if they mentioned. Um, yeah, because they don't mention as a traveling spell book, but it's like you can cast a copy of spell from your spell book into another book, for example, if you want to make a backup of your spell book. I like how they mention it as something that you can do, not something that you should be doing. And there, it's just 1 hour and 10 gold pieces for each level of the copied spell. So yeah, the other one is definitely the 40 of the 50 gold per level is learning the spell. They do say this reason many wizards keep backup spellbooks in a safe place. But I mean, sure, there's been plenty of adventures where Art of Mike Disney rating 67 people. Wow. I hope you're doing well, sir. Welcome, Raiders. We are discussing the cost of wizardry. We've been talking about some of the things that cost money as a wizard, and We've mentioned spell components, we've mentioned spell books, we've mentioned learning new spells. Um, so if yeah, John looks a touch different. I'm not sure which one of us is supposed to be John playing the part of John at this point, but um, but yeah, I mean, you probably should have. Do you think Magic is weaker in fifth than in other editions? That's a hard question. You
I think
know,
it's been toned down.
so here's the thing. I think Magic where I couldn't go because I'm not sure on a spell for spell basis whether that's the case. I will say this though, because of the various abilities that have been added to the other classes, um, Magic is probably weaker relative to the non-magical classes compared to past editions. Uh, whether it's any appreciable difference, I'm not entirely sure.
Um,
But
I think there actually is. If you look at casting a magic missile spell, in earlier editions, as you leveled, the spell became more powerful. In fifth edition, in order for the spell to become more powerful, you have to burn a higher level spell slot to cast it.
that's fair. And I wonder whether or not that has as much to do with the fact that in earlier editions there was no upcasting, and not only that, it was full on Vancian. It basically you cast and forget it. So if you didn't have two magic missiles prepared, you were just you just had to spell the once. Where fifth edition you can cast it as basically as many spot times you have spell slots available for it.
Actually, wizards still have to pick their spells.
They
Sorcerers can cast if they want.
they do, but I don't. They have to pick their
That's right.
spells.
They can prepare spells and then they choose what to cast from their slots, using their
Right.
slot.
Right. So it's still different from the old time where if you wanted to cast Magic Missile more than once, you had to use two of your available
Yeah,
spells on Magic Missile. But basically, you had to declare ahead of time. Is what it basically came down to.
the D4 plus one blood wild
Um.
for magic missile.
Yeah, and the big thing with Magic Missiles is the fact that unless you've had specific, and I believe it's Shield Spell was the one, and there's a couple of magic items as well, but it always hit. So that was automatic damage, which was nice for a wizard. It's one way to make sure that you do something. Yeah, Pat. I like that idea. Having a weaker version where it is an actual to hit roll. More as much for the because I think a wizard throwing daggers is a silly thing, and I think a wizard actually trying to stab something with a dagger is just ridiculous.
Yep.
BX 1d6. Huh. Okay. All right.
Edition wizard, you actually didn't use magic missile at first level. You used sleep. You would cast sleep and then pull out your crossbow, and you'd use your crossbow for the rest of the day because you only got one spell all
I
day.
I didn't think that they could use crossbows. I know they could use like slings and stuff and darts. A lot of darts. And Amanda's mentioned the our new website that opened yesterday, www.blueboxrpg.com. Go visit it. Not now, later. If you want to open it now and then take a look at it later, that's wonderful. Darts, slings, staff, dagger, sling, staff. Thank you. That sounds about right. Jay Lord Gazumba, good to see you, sir.
Hey, Jay.
So yeah, Jay, we've been talking about the cost of wizardry, and so far we've gone through the cost to learn spells, and even in 5e, they do have a cost for learning new spells. Um, we've gone through spell components that we haven't touched on all of them, just the fact that they are out there, and um, you know there's some of them are really expensive, like things that cost 100 gold per casting of a spell. Um, we've also talked about spell books and having more than one spell book because uh, you know you go wandering around and have your spell book stolen. Well, guess what? You got to go recoup that loss and get your spells back, and that's not cheap.
That was actually one of the old tired tropes from second edition. Was oh no, the wizard's spellbook got stolen again. We have to track down the thief so he can use it, get his spells back.
Yeah, if I was the wizard, the DM would be getting an earful. If it happens once, okay. If it happens twice, that gets a little old.
3 and 3 5 had a spell mastery feat that gave you a number of spells equal to your intelligence modifier that you just straight up had mastered and you could learn them without the spell book.
Jay, absolutely not. I definitely use traveling spell books.
Yep, so do I.
We were kind of noting the fact that 5e mentions possibly making a backup of your spell book. Doesn't call them traveling spell books, but it kind of says you can make a backup if you want to, instead of saying no, you really should have a backup of your spell book. A traveling spell book does kind of help with that. It's not a complete thing, but so yeah, let's see what else. Let's talk about some of the other things in terms of wizards that may come a cost, and some an external hard drive. uh, oh man. What was that? Universal spellcasting book? Connectivity. An Elven Decker. Somebody had mentioned, and we'd kind of touched upon before we got down to like the financial costs of it. But Pat had mentioned needing to play smart because wizards are really squishy at low levels. I mean, they're not as bad as they were in first and second edition and in CNC, where that D4 hit die was painful, especially if you played with the DM who didn't give you max hit points at first level. Um, I'm trying to remember if any of the spells in 5e actually have physical effects on the wizard like they used to. Some of them were
Some of
exhausting.
some of them were brutal too. The haste spell aged the wizard a year.
I think the haste
And they
spell. I think the haste spell aged the target.
believe it aged the wizard, and Wish was even worse.
Yeah, haste, because I know in CNC haste ages the target because they're actually very careful to state when there are haste like effects that don't age the target. Which brings the interesting things like haste ages the target a year. Well, if we're going to cast haste on somebody, we're casting it on the elf. It's like it's one of those interesting things about elves having 800 to 1,000 year lifespan, or in some of these systems being pretty much immortal. You're about to start a campaign on Saturday as a Blade Song wizard. Good luck.
Yeah, because a melee wizard's just in a bad spot.
Oh, you're all starting at level 5. That's a little brutal if you're starting a wizard at level 5 and you're especially if you don't play them often because that's a bunch of spells that you need to
You're
uh,
looking at level spells, so
get a
that's a
handle
lot of.
on.
You got to know your way around.
Especially you throw in the cantrips as well. Um, so I here's the thing. I guess one of the questions I have for you, where do your wizards normally get their spells? And you can chat, please. Let's go through some of this because uh, I've have a couple of ideas and things that we've done, but I'm curious as to the kind of things that you've done in terms of spells and finding new spells. Castersonly.com. Oh, Steve. Hey, Longshot. Good to see you. Found treasures, libraries, other spellcasters, spell research, etc.
Yeah, they get every time they gain a level, they get two spells just from the increased knowledge. Is that
Mm.
from the rule? Then they can find scrolls, beating other wizards, or finding other spell books, libraries, like Pat said, spell research, and in some cases, if there's another wizard in the party, they go, "Hey, want to share spell books and swap spells?"
Hmm. Hey, listen, Pat. I mean, that's certainly a valid way to play it.
The
Um,
downside, the downside of that is when you get a new level of spell, the wizard doesn't get those new spells, so they're not getting all their abilities as they level up.
I mean, there is a way around that, and it's something that's come up in the CNC game at times. Is they'll often find spells that they can't cast yet. So they may collect either find spell scroll or they might find an enemy wizard and get their spell book, their traveling spell book, and realize that there are spells in there that they weren't going to be able to use until they hit the appropriate level.
But
Yeah,
while
yeah. God.
it's that's a good point for training, there's something else that probably ought to be touched on is being a wizard is extremely expensive, but all casters have spell components of some type or another, so they're paying money. But the melee types, you know, periodically they have to get their professionally repaired, weapons professionally sharpened, hilts rewrapped, stuff that they're not going to do while traveling through the woods. That way, it's not the wizard's the money sink of the party, and you have ways that these other characters have to have upkeep and costs as well.
And it's important that the DM, you have the DM actually enforcing that because unfortunately you don't see a lot of it at times. The Now, I mean, the interesting thing is when you're talking about the wizard and especially like spell components, where when spell components start getting to the ridiculous ones where it's a hundred gold piece diamond or something like that, or pearl, or various pieces of precious metal. I here's a question. Why do you think some of they add those kind of spell components where they are that expensive? What would be a reason why they would do that other than just for the flavor of it?
gives the DM control of the spells. If you have a party that's charging into fights all the time, and every fight two people get killed, so they're having to burn those 100 gold piece diamonds for the revivify spell.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get hard to find because the party's bought them all and used them.
It's an interesting point, and
Sure.
actually, that's actually even a step beyond where I was going with this. And Pat just hit the answer that I was actually looking for in the gold economy. What's one of the main complaints about that you hear about 5e?
Players have too much gold, but that's
All this,
because
it's not even so what they have too much gold. There's nothing to spend it on.
yeah, but that's because DMs aren't requiring spell components.
Right. It's like that you've got all this gold. Make the party use it for something. If they're just like piling on the gold, well, there are things that you can there are things that have a cost that it's fully and completely reasonable to have as part of the game, and even makes sense. It's not like you're intentionally trying to penalize them, but have them paying for those components, have them paying the cost for learning new spells. Yes, Tracy. eh, you know
The
um
important thing, though, Pat, is when you're tight fisted about giving out particularly gold, the party has to make enough to pay their expenses. Or why are they adventuring and not working as waitresses, blacksmiths, or whatever if they're not making money to go out and risk their lives?
there's certainly something to that as well. It's if adventuring, I mean, granted, yeah, there are those who adventure just for the sake of adventuring, but most adventurers are doing it maybe for the fame, but also for the reward of it. And if they're not making enough gold, that's going to kind of
You know,
damper one's enthusiasm for putting their life on the line for reasons that well, may or may not really be important to them.
people got to eat.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And yeah, I mean, Joffrey, the encouraging those to learn to collect supplies while they're yeah, well, sure. I mean, supply collecting supplies is certainly a good idea.
Well, one of the things I normally do, um, you have rare components and you have common components. Rare ones normally have a gold piece cost associated with them. That might be some miniature thing that they have to have, or a diamond, or something like that. But if the player needs sand to cast a sleep spell, well, they're camping on the shore of a lake, there's sand on the beach. They're going to restock their sand because it's right there. So while they're adventuring and traveling, oh, the druid goes, oh, hey, I need some of this mistletoe in this tree for some of my spells. Or the casters, people who need components, are going to be looking as they're traveling.
It certainly makes for cool side quest ideas. Have wait, we're in a forest with all kinds of herbs around. Yeah, let's stock up. Don't worry about typos. I speak fluent typo here. Canadian Ancient Gamer, thank you for the subscription. 27 months. Good to see you, sir. So yeah, we've how many? Actually, here's an interesting thought. How many of you, and this may be more for the DMs than the players, but players, let me know if you've encountered this, where your wizard lives in a city, and uh, kind of need to be registered or some kind of taxation for being able to cast within city borders,
I
or
actually had I actually had in one of my cities a they called it the magic ward, where
mm,
all the spellcasters had to live. They had their own inns, they had their own taverns. You had to live there because It used to be a normal, middle class neighborhood until a couple wizards got in a fight and leveled it. So they rebuilt it and said, no, all you guys have to live here. You don't want that crap anywhere else. And that's where you'd find your potions and any magic items or anything like that. If you could find it, it was in that section of the city.
I listen. I it's kind of the old thing. You had the cities where I you couldn't you had to basically hand in your guns. You weren't allowed to have your guns out showing in the city enforced by a marshal. I mean, honestly, a wizard can wreak all kinds of havoc if they decide to start casting spells without paying attention or just don't care. So yeah, no, I mean, listen, I can understand that. I think I've actually had cities where wizards were not allowed, without special dispensation, were not allowed to cast spells within the city walls. I will get to the pin question, Amanda. I do see the pin question. I'll get to that in a moment. Rachel, I had a goblin wizard whose island had rules and regulations about the type of magic that can be cast and who can cast it. Divination is the only type of magic allowed, but my character's uncle dealed in a lot of black market deals and snuck my character his first books. I like it.
Now, those exotic items that you're referring to, like the Dragon's Fart Pat 66 mentioned in the Dragon's Laughter,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that was actually mentioned in second edition as crafting components for magic items because magic item crafting was a lot different then than it is today in 5e. They had you have to get this super rare ore that you only find in this dwarven mine. And the example they gave, they had to go on like 3 different quests, and then they took a shortcut for the last thing. It needed to be blessed by a deity to make a +1 sword. And it's like really three separate adventures, or what would have been 4 separate adventures to make a +1 sword. Wait a minute, how are these things found normally?
Actually, and there was another thing, and I'm curious as to whether or not it still exists, but it, maybe somebody check me on this. Am I remembering correctly that there used to be a permanency spell that was required so that
Yes,
any enchantment on a weapon still stayed?
yes, they did, but you could use it for other spells as well. So you could use you could give yourself permanent dark vision.
And that does not exist in 5th edition. Huh. All right. It's funny. I in my 5th edition campaign, I actually had one of my characters actually made a magic item, and I had completely, despite the fact that we were all 1st and 2nd edition players, I'd completely forgotten about it. All right, eighth level magic user spell. Gee. On a 5% chance of on con loss. Oh, ooh,
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that permanently drained stats in 2e. Wizards got the worst stat they could have drained, con, got brutalized with a lot of their spells. Yet having a good con increased their max hit points by 50%, went from 4 to 6 hit points.
it's yeah. I mean, stat drain is brutal. I was remembering how how bad it was in terms of creatures that did it, and playing CNC, you just go through the list of undead and how many of them drain levels and stats, and most of them are permanent unless other outside of having a restoration cast on you. Well, McKeon, good to see you. So yeah, let's see. We've discussed the cost of components, and we've talked a little bit about going finding those components, and it makes for a potential uh, side adventure, side quest if you happen to be in an area where the components, and hopefully your wizard's paying attention, where those components may be found. Uh, Always can have something interesting happen when the wizard goes off picking flowers for their spells. There is, the cost of spell books, the cost of learning, uh, and making sure that you have more than one spell book. Even if you go with 5e and it doesn't mention traveling spell books, if you have, let me just put it this way: if you're a 5e wizard and you've got a DM who's been playing and DMing since 1e, 2e, go get yourself a second spell book and make sure that you're making copies of your spells. Because I guarantee you at some point they are going to kidnap your spellbook on you. Um, there's the cost of just learning them in general. And we've talked about some of the physical costs, the cost of some of these spells, just what they take out of you. I'm trying to think. Can you think of anything other costs that we haven't touched on yet, Mike? If you have any, or if the chat has any.
I know earlier editions had a fair amount of stat costs. I know up to 3.5 had XP costs for magic item creation.
Hmm.
I actually let one of the house rules I did is I gave out XP for good role playing. I let players put that XP if they wanted to in a separate pool to be used to create magic items. Now, if the player if the fighter donated XP, um, the XP they donated would have to be used for an item for them. But
That's it. That's good being able to bank that for
it
the point at which that may be needed.
it spread the cost. Because I mean, you could lose a level or two by creating a magic item, but
And
3.5 didn't have the potential stat loss.
I think, and it's so funny, I think crafting magical items and doing it as part of a campaign or a game is feels like it's something of a lost art. You just don't. I don't. I mean, I've had it happen in my games, but it was player driven. They wanted to be able to do it, and but I just don't think you. Maybe it's just anecdotal, and my experiences don't match others, but I'm curious as to how many players here. Um, Actually, man, another poll. Um, as a player, has your character ever crafted a magical item in game?
I've had characters working towards it, mostly because um, in one case, a dwarven cleric of Moradin, who, along with being the chief dwarven god, is
Mm-hmm.
also a god of crafting, totally in his realm of abilities and everything to craft items.
By the way, Steve, that should be / poll, I believe, and then hit enter, and it'll bring up the window. I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
But the only other one I've looked at and that my players have actually done a lot is healing potions, because you can craft those in fifth edition with herbalist kits. And if the party decides for some reason they don't want to have a healer, That's the only combat healing they have.
Oh, there we go. Someone got it. Have you crafted a magic item? Uh, it's funny that you mentioned a dwarf of Morden. Um, in my game, we had one of the quests was they ended up retrieving something of a dwarven artifact, and it was an anvil. An anvil that was sacred to them, and because my player's cleric was a forge domain cleric of Moradin, when they brought the anvil back, the character was allowed usage of the anvil. At which point they went through the process of creating a magic item for another player, a magical weapon. So that was a fun story thing, having that happen in game. Man, I didn't think that was you. I thought that was Steve. Honestly, yeah, it was fun. It was an interesting thing. I decided, did some rolling on that, and it turned out that the rolling I did resulted in the weapon having a personality. Became a sentient weapon. So, much hijinks ensued. It also might have stolen a bit of magic from the sorcerer poor sorcerer just happened to be walking by.
Yeah, the interesting thing about sentient weapons is in one of the rule sets, the sentience was actually the item's creator. They put themselves into the weapon,
Huh.
either willingly or not realizing that's what they were doing.
That's a pretty good number of people who've crafted a magic item. That's really cool. I'm pleasantly surprised to see that. I honestly did not think the number was going to be that high. That's an interesting thought. The caster putting their own sentience into the weapon. I mean, I guess when the all their alternative for becoming immortal was being a lich, being a weapon probably wouldn't be that bad.
Now, something else I've done is an interesting possible storyline, particularly for a paladin. You inherit your father's sword. Your father was a famous paladin. He disappeared. They were able to retrieve his sword. They won't tell you what happened to him. So your starting character is running around with a normal longsword that belonged to your father. Well, your character is never going to get rid of this longsword because it belonged to your father. So what I did with that is had it level up with him and slowly gain magical abilities.
Interesting. Uh, and Pat said you heard one of the old editions of sentient. I mean, you can have for like sentient weapons and sentient magic items. I mean, you really could go anywhere with that. Whatever makes the most sense, honestly, for me in terms of the story. I would go with whether it be the creator who may or may not actually be a wizard. Um, having themselves accidentally sucked into, their spirit sucked into the weapon, have it done on purpose. Possibly their body is failing them, and this is their one hope for living on. Having it be something done, a demon or something bound to a cursed blade. Good point. Good, perfect. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can go with it, and I would say there's no real wrong way in terms of the rules. Do what works best for the story that
Never,
you're
never
you're
fix
trying
the
to do.
story for the weapon.
Yeah. My barbarian just got an ancestral axe last session that grows stronger as the bond with my people becomes stronger. That's cool. I like that. Interesting, interesting bit of match there. We've definitely wandered from the topic, but hey, what the heck? You
Well,
know what?
these typically
What?
magic items are created by wizards according to lore, most lore. So
I mean, they
those
have to
creations
enchant
cost
them,
money.
but I think I've normally played it because I mean normally you're not thinking of wizards sitting there with a hammer banging out a weapon. Um, that's true. Something anti paladin. I what? Um, you know the in terms of like wizards, I look at it as they'll be the one enchanting it, so normally be like a joint process for it because I mean I suppose you could have a wizard who's a blacksmith. Um, it's not necessarily completely out of the realm of possibility, but still, Holy Avenger likely has a cleric in the mix. Yeah, no, that's certainly true.
If
A weapon
not,
would be
if not something more powerful, depends on the version of the Holy Avenger you were referring to. The old fifth edition Holy Avenger. no, no mortal cleric is going to lay hands on it. And I'm going to make this a Holy Avenger
mm,
because when it dispelled magic from evil casters thrown at the paladin wielder, it's a little beyond the scope of what a cleric can do.
Pat says the topic only lasts only for the first 5 minutes. Sir, I will have you know that we lasted 7 minutes. I just want to wield an unholy Iculus. Okay, all right. I'm just gonna leave that there. But yeah, in terms of just to get back to it for a bit. Yeah, I mean the basic idea though is it is wizards. Honestly, it can be very expensive to play a wizard. It probably should be expensive to be a wizard, mostly because of the fact that while they start off, the weakest member of the party in most cases, the wizard is going to get to eventually get to a point where they've got ridiculous, world and reality bending powers should they survive that long. Um, and that should come with that really should come with the cost. Otherwise, why wouldn't you play wizard? If you're going to have that kind of
Long,
power.
as long as that cost is being balanced,
Oh yeah.
because again, we've mentioned several times, fifth edition magic has been toned down. Now there's a lot shorter durations on stuff. 3.5 had a spell that lasts an hour. You could buff your had one for each stat. You could buff a stat for 1 hour per level with no material component cost.
Uh, Pat, do dancing swords require bard's help in its creation? You know, that's a heck of a thought. I like it. I like it. And Steve, truthfully, I just want to wear the robes and hat. Well, I mean, I don't think anyone can blame you there. I mean, who wouldn't? Robes are very
And
comfortable.
and yes, Absalon, I do remember the +6 Holy Avenger.
I'm trying to remember the +6 Holy Avenger because I know it was +2 in anyone's hands, +5 in the paladin's hands. I'm trying to remember the +6. Was it just like, oh, okay. Was in the original Unearthed Arcana? Huh. Um, that can depend, honestly. That's an interesting question. Uh, I would say probably more than a druid. With regards to a cleric, I think that's going to depend a lot on
How much
how
already dies?
or how. I think that's going to depend a lot on how clerics and the nature of the divine casters are run in your game. It is being is does it require them being a serious part of whatever church of for whatever god that they're worshiping. um I mean, you saw such things such as the paladins, especially like the old school paladins, having to do the tithing of 10%. I would, for an adventuring cleric, I would kind of consider the same thing to be in effect, at least. So it depends on, I guess, how much support they get. Are they on their own completely and they're just relying on, their own personal connection to their god or goddess? Um, Probably on average, I think a wizard would be more expensive, but it's yeah, tithing teach guy. I'm thinking a polytheist is not doing much tithing. Maybe
They,
some gold here and there when they want something special, but
yeah, normally the way that works is, and most people in the average polytheistic D&D game aren't going to worship one god. They're going to tithe to whoever they needed to tithe to for whatever outcome they were trying to get.
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
if you look at the Greeks and Romans, the priests served one god. Everybody else prayed to, Tai Chi and Tai Chi was a goddess of victory, and whichever god who was over whatever they were trying to accomplish, that's who they prayed to, and that's who they tithed to.
Well, I mean, the priests could also. There were also priests who were special to specific gods and goddesses. Um, but I mean, it's not. How much of an impact that had is not entirely clear. Um. All right. So, kind of waiting on Jay to go live, but in the meantime, we here at Blue Box have a question we'd like to ask you. Okay. No, not to rush you, Jay. I don't mean to rush you, but it's uh, your bank account number again. Uh, yeah, Steve, you can send that to me in a DM. Anyway, we here at Blue Box have a question that we like to ask you, and that is if you've been enjoying the content that you've been watching and you have not yet followed, or you have followed but you have not yet subscribed, or gasp, you've subscribed but you've let your subscription lapse. The question we have for you is, what are you
What are you doing?
doing? Give us a follow, give us a sub, or, just hang out and talk and chat. Join the Discord. We've got all kinds of shenanigans happening on a daily basis. We're doing some talking about D&D. People are posting pictures of stuff that they've been painting, miniatures and other things. Uh, all kinds of conversations going on. A Mystical Unicorn Painting writes, veritable volumes doing recaps of the shows that we have. Speaking of the shows, you can catch us here every Wednesday night for Loremaster Arcanum at 5:45 Central, 6:45 Eastern. On Tuesday nights, we have Greyhawk Awakenings at 5 Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. Uh, on Sundays, and Amanda, do me a favor, remind me what we have this Sunday, because the schedule is kind of going to be changing at some point, and I don't remember when that's taking effect because my brain just froze up on there.
Tears of Air.
We do have Tears of Air on Sunday, and I believe that is 1:30 Central, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Okay. Um, and for now, on alternate weeks, we have the Fall of Red Dawn campaign, which I believe is been starting at actually it's later in the afternoon. Check the weekly schedule. We will be having at some point Tears of Arid as of the 22nd. We'll start going weekly, and the time may shift a little bit for that. I know they're working that detail out, checking to see who can and cannot, because on alternate weeks, Fall of Red Dawn will be following right afterward. So, and Friday nights, we have got Friday Night Crusades in the Discord. Anyone is welcome to join the game at any time. It is the most low pressure game that you can possibly play in. Uh, all you need to do is download the player's handbook. It is free in digital format. The links and everything that you need to know is in the Discord channel for Friday Night Crusades, and you can always hit me up if you have any questions. We've had anywhere from 3 to 14 people, might be 13 people play in a single session. Um, so please, if you're interested, come by. You're more than welcome to just hang out and listen in, and see if it's something that you'd like to be a part of. We would love to have you. Um, so, with that having been said, I see that Jay is now live, though he is currently on his starting thing. So, we are going to be raiding into Lord Gazumba, and let me get that kicked off. Just a also further reminder, we have things that are coming up. Amanda's got the website there, the brand spanking new Blue Box RPG website. A lot of work has been done by, especially the Zohan, as well as others contributing to it. But we do have coming up in February is going to be the St. Jude's Children's Hospital fundraiser. Last year, the community raised over $20,000 for the community and for the fundraiser, and we will be trying to do more than that this time. There will be, I believe, 8 to 10 streamers over the course of 3 days. I will be running a game on my own channel. John will be running games here. And, so I hope you'll be able to join us all. But for now, I bid you all a good night. We raiding into Lord Gazumbo with 54 viewers. And get those emotes ready to go. See you later, everyone.